Hello and welcome to Waypoint, the AirMed&Rescue podcast. I'm Junior Editor Oliver Cuenca, and I'm here today with Alf Evans, the Head of Operations at Cornwall Air Ambulance. Hi Alf, how are you doing?
Hi Oliver, I'm great. Great, how are you?
Oh, not bad. Glad that you could join us today. So, just to start off, I was thinking, why don't you tell me and our audience just a little bit about Cornwall Air Ambulance?
Well, Cornwall Air Ambulance was the first air ambulance, as we never ever get tired of telling people. We were formed in 1987, which was the first air ambulance in the UK, and we cover Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. And because we're part of the South West Ambulance Service, the tasking comes from them. We can go into Devon or we can go anywhere in the South West area. So there's a bit of overlap and mutual support of the air ambulances. So we're not strictly Cornwall, and that does cover the Isles of Scilly as well, but we often take people to Bristol and points east as well.
Cool. So what your head of operations, what kind of thing does that entail exactly?
That's a very good question. I'm still trying to find the answer to that after 3.5 years. Ops stands for other people's stuff, but if you do your job properly, no one even notices that you exist, because operations is trying to make everything work. Everything should be there and ready 2 seconds before someone needs it. When it doesn't, then that's when ops steps in. So we're trying to oversee and get ahead of issues. I think you can even buy a t-shirt with the ops manager which says, we solve problems that you don't know you've got in ways you're not going to understand, which is slightly smug, but you think, do you know what, there's a lot of truth in that you don't want the operators really to figure out they've got a problem because you've seen it coming and you've got ahead of it, and then it's just an administration and an amendment to the procedures or a note saying, oh, by the way, you're doing it this way, or there's this change. You know, they shouldn't even know they've got a problem, and you should have sorted it in a way they don't need to understand. I mean, obviously, you're going to talk to people to get, you know, the pilot's insight, the doctor's insight, that you just get the specialist knowledge so you do apply the solution properly, but they shouldn't really understand that you should just get ahead of it. With the air ambulance being completely funded by our amazing donors, I can bore you with the stats because they are insane later, but our donors support us. So we've got a big donor support operation as well, and our donors like to see the aircraft and they like to get amongst it to see what they're spending their money on, basically. So you are interacting with that public element. We have retail shops. We have to interact with that. There is also, you know, the visits to the building and the building infrastructure and how the engineers interact, because we, franchise out, sounds like we're McDonald's, but we farm out our engineering services to Castle Air, who are our local partners, who also serve as our air operating certificate, our license to operate. So there's all these different elements, and you're at the center of it, trying to make it all work and often even translate for people using different languages. All English, but you know, your visitors and flight safety are completely different. You know, they're different languages, and you have to translate. And you know why you can't lean on the aircraft, why standing next to it when it takes off isn't a good thing, that sort of thing. Just making it all run together when there's certain elements of it that are naturally not great bedfellows.
Yeah, I can imagine. It sounds like a really complex operation, honestly. Like how close to this actual flying do you get? Have you ever been up in a helicopter or?
Yes, I'm ex-Air Force, so I was in the Air Force for 23 years, and I was out in Northern Ireland as basically the head of operations in Northern Ireland, which was primarily a helicopter base at that time. Yeah. So the whole helicopter interacting and different, that there was a lot more helicopters, but there was the element of it doing it during the Troubles, so it was not surprisingly quite similar. Wow. You know, a lot of different elements all interacting, and you have to create an environment where everything just works without people having to go into why it should work and why it's not working. It's just got to work.
Yeah, absolutely. So you became head of operations in 2022, I believe.
That's right. Yes.
So what brought you to working for Cornwall Air Ambulance, and what sort of things were you doing? Well, you touched on some of that before already, what you were
Yeah,
doing previously.
I spent 23 years in the Air Force. Part of that was dealing with survival equipment. Part of that was being an aviator myself. I was on transport and air-to-air refueling aircraft. I was a navigator. So I've got an aviation, well, I did have an aviation head on me, but that was what it was, all clockwork, cockpits and what have you. So the whole flight safety, aviation, that's a background. Flight ops, I did flight ops in Northern Ireland with helicopters, so that's another element to add to that. I was, and still am, a human factors facilitator, so that's all. I was also a flight safety officer as well for one of the stations I served at. So this whole operations, flight safety, helicopter ops, aviation stuff was kind of already there. I then left the Air Force in Cornwall, and I spent 13 years doing disaster relief operations. So the people element of it came with that as well. And this job came up just as I, basically had an opportunity. There was a big restructure where I was working, and I was made redundant, and this job came up perfectly, closer to home, more aligned with my experiences as well. The medical element is new to me, but, every job should stretch you. But we've got, our service ambulance service paramedics, and we've got our NHS doctors, although they are more consultant anaesthetists type. That's sort of that end of the spectrum. They really are at the top of their game in that. And when I arrived, it was quite in an area of rapid change. The business was changing in the supplying market, and there was quite a lot of turbulence in the market of the people doing the engineering and AOC services, with some of the companies restructuring and changing direction. So we were moving across to Castle Air, part of our local suppliers, which has lots of benefits, and they're a great fit for us. Local, agile. They're just starting out in the air ambulance world, so it was a much more tailored fit rather than there's the menu, that's what you get. So it was a more collaborative work with Castle. We had, or the air ambulance itself had just started using recently the 169, the AWE 169, which was quite new. We were building a new HQ. We were looking at bringing doctors on more as part of the service we offer. They were on board as educational support physicians, but they wanted to develop that role and make it more of a permanent thing, which is what we're doing now. So there was lots and lots and lots of things, and we were even buying a second helicopter as well. So every lever you could possibly move for change for all the right reasons has been pulled. So we're starting to see real traction there from quite a change. A lot of sequence of events happened about 3-4 years ago.
Well, I remember talking because I went to your 35 years events, and it was very clear at the time that quite a lot had happened in the past, in the recent years, and was happening at the present time. So you say you hadn't really had much experience, I should say, of the air medical sector before this current
No, not
job.
at all. I'd kind of done expedition medical stuff, but not as a customer, thank goodness. But as part of the survival exercises that we were part of and ran as a survival instructor, there was a medical element to that. Also with the disaster relief, you were plumbing in with your emergency medical evacuation and treatment people as well. So there was a little bit of it, but not up close and personal with, that's basically the service you are delivering, which is, medical excellence, at the point where the patient is.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about delivering that sort of service, I was thinking we could talk a bit about Cornwall and your operating area, Scilly, and all that kind of thing as a place, because it's quite a unique sort of situation you've got. You've got a lot of big old peninsula jutting out in the Atlantic with all that entails, changeable weather and all that kind of thing. You've got a lot of small communities, you've got big hills, tricky roads, and that's not just in the countryside, but also in many of the towns. How do you, and of course if you're flying over to Scilly, of course there is the added issue of you're going over open water.
Yes.
So how do you navigate all that kind of thing, and how do you work around that and assess when it's safe to fly, basically?
Yeah. Well, we have a rigorous set of rules, regulations from our Castle Air operators, which is derived from the CAA. But we have many dispensations because of we call HEMS, which is Helicopter Emergency Medical Service. But we have a fantastic set of pilots. Starting to become more common, but was unusual when we did it, is that the pilots are direct employees of the charity. So you've got shop managers and van drivers, and you've also got pilots. So the HR have got quite a spectrum of people to employ. But the great advantage of having the pilots as charity employees is that you've separated the profit and safety elements with a firewall, where you just go, look, that's your concern. There shouldn't be any financial concerns with flight safety, but they're often, if you're going to get pressure, that's where it's going to come from. Now, we've got that charity firewall between making a profit and safety, which I'm really keen on. And that's one of the core elements that the charity has chosen to do, which I'm really, really a strong supporter of. So that when the pilots are going out, they've got the patient in mind, but above that is safety, and that's the safety of the patient if you picked them up, or the safety of the crew. That is going to be paramount. There's no commercial pressures, and with the pilots, we have a great understanding of that. No other pressure to that, because we're such a small outfit. You can have a direct relationship with the pilots and the chief pilot and Castle's chief pilot. So we're a very close knit and open and honest outfit, where we talk about the safety stuff and what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. We're always trying to cut time off, because literally seconds can mean the difference between life and death. But you can't just jump in a helicopter and go, because there's the danger elements, and finding where that balance is something that we all have to be honest about. And having the setup that we do, I think, gives us the best go at that. Scilly's is an interesting case in point, where if you look at the regulations, I think with the you are not offshore, air quotes, until if you just step out over the beach and come back, you're not offshore. It's I think it's measured in time, but it's about 12 miles from land, it works out to be. And I think the Scilly's is like 11 or something like that. The margin is so small that you can sit back and go, no, we're not offshore, no. And it's literally seconds between being offshore and not being offshore. Yeah. So we've looked into this, and we have floats on the aircraft. We carry a life raft. We give them life jackets, short-term air supply system, and the training for that. So we're leaning into it as if we were offshore, but we're not. But we're saying, look, for all intents and purposes, we are. We're looking at immersion suits as well. We've got immersion suits, because if you go down in the drink in December, then you're not going to get some get out of jail free card, because you're 1 mile inside the regulations. It's still going to be as cold and as wet and as difficult to rescue people. So we've lent into that. But the expense from the charity to look after our people and give them the duty of care is, it's not even a question. It's yes, we will do this. And we were looking at ways of, improving what we do. We used to have the life rafts that were fitted on inside the sponsons. And because we go to the Scilly's, once a week, something like that, we're carrying that extra weight around Cornwall for no reason. So now we've got a life raft to carry on to save the weight. So that's one of the interesting elements, because we've got these islands that we serve. Again, we do tend to get dragged into the discussion about bringing people off the island, that there is no other way of doing it, which isn't quite what HEMS is set up for. But that's an ongoing conversation that changes and develops every week, and each case is a case-by-case basis. But there is the element of risk that if you leave them on the island for a non-serious case, if it develops, then it could be serious, and then the weather conditions could decrease. The Scilly's is a different case, but we try and treat it the same, but obviously you can't. The rest of the operating zone is interesting, because we get different weather on the north coast and the south. That's another interesting element. For at the moment, literally the pilot this morning was talking about the north coast has got all low cloud, but the south coast is in bright sunshine. And west to east also varies. We've got the hills to the east, which is Bodmin, which can be a little bit claggy as well, but it does provide the rain shadow on the other side. We also don't have a major trauma unit within the county. That's Derriford at Plymouth in Devon.
Yeah.
So a lot of what we do is getting involved in taking people who need that trauma care from where they are in Cornwall you can be an hour and a half away from or even 2 hours away from the trauma centre, and we can cut that down to about 20 minutes flight time. So that's, where you've got the challenges is where the air ambulance really does, lean into and doubles up the assets and the benefits of having the air ambulance here.
Yeah. So, do you ever have trouble finding landing sites at all?
Not so much. A lot of air ambulances, for instance, London, have issues finding landing sites because they're, obviously a lot more built up. Because it's so rural and quite green in Cornwall, we don't tend to have that problem. We can land on rugby pitches, cricket pitches, things like that. So we can, as a general rule, land quite close to where the patient is. We don't tend to have that problem. Other air ambulances don't convey their patients as much, and other air ambulances, for instance, as I said, London has real problems, that they can have real challenges finding somewhere to land quite close, but then they have more ambulances, so they can mitigate that.
Yeah.
One thing that did intrigue me was how each air ambulance, although providing on paper the same service, the way that they approach things are quite different depending on the demographic, the nature of the emergencies, and the terrain and the topography and all the challenges. They are more different than I thought they were going to be honest.
Yeah. So one other thing I meant to ask, Cornwall is obviously a major tourist hotspot. People
Indeed.
come out to it getting the sun, sea and the sand, but
that's right.
That obviously translates for your purposes into a massive population surge on a temporary basis.
It does. It can. It depends who you talk to. The population triples in summer, allegedly.
Wow.
Yeah. With all the campsites and all the hotels, the amount of road traffic and the amount of people really does increase. So I think Newquay is supposed to its population triples if you count all the campsites within the local area. That tumbles down into the figures that 1 in 4 of our missions are to help visitors. And if you think about that, then those numbers must be coming from pretty much 6 months of the year, the summer season. But if the population is going to triple, then that extra 2/3 is coming from people outside of the county. So yes, we do help a lot of people because they tend to be coming on holiday to do outdoor activities. They will be traveling around the county a lot, and our roads can be a little bit narrow, and you can get people having accidents with unfamiliar roads and narrow roads as well. So yes, that does slew our busy time to be very much during the summer. It averages out to be about 3 a day, but in actuality that's probably 1 to 2 in the winter and about 3 to 4 in the summer. So we definitely have a busy season. So yeah, we have staggered the servicing on our helicopters to make sure that we have the helicopters available during the summer because that is our busy period.
Yeah, I can imagine. Is it and it's mostly road accidents?
Well, it's about 50-50 with trauma and medical incidents because people tend to change their lifestyle when they come on holiday because it's a holiday. They'll be out walking, they'll probably be eating a lot more. All of the stresses and strains on the body probably are more in effect when they're on holiday because they will be doing things that are not normal to them because they're on holiday.
Yeah, and there's some lovely beers locally, aren't there?
Yeah.
So I thought it'd be good to touch a bit more on the whole charity aspect, because I know for our international audiences, obviously from a UK perspective, air ambulances being a charity is completely the norm. It's like basically every single air ambulance is charity based, but internationally that's quite unusual.
It is. Yeah, we do not get a single penny from the government, and when I started I was mildly outraged by that, and but talking to people who've been in it years, they went no, that's how we want to keep it. And you're like, really? Yeah, because if we're getting the funding from our local people, we can tailor the service exactly for what they need and what they want, rather than a service that is a one-size-fits-all that if you were part of a larger organisation and possibly government run might be the appeal. And you think, oh yeah, that's you pay for what you want rather than paying for just what you get, which is handed out on a more higher view. And there certainly wouldn't be 22 air ambulances if the government was funding it in the country. There would be a lot less covering a wider region. So, yes, in some ways you think, well, it's outrageous that the government isn't funding this, but there's not many people doing star jumps in the charity to petition the government to take it over, because I think it's almost like private healthcare for the local people. They pay and they get the service that they want. So it does sound rather strange, but if you have the means of coming by it, you might want to do that.
Yeah. So you mentioned some of the things that you use to raise funds. You got your charity shops, and did you say there was a lottery or some sort? Or?
There is a lottery. Yeah, we have a lottery. We even have a music festival.
Wow.
Would you believe? Because summer season is festival season in Cornwall. A few years ago, we were approached by people, and people came up with the idea. It's like, well, we've got so many people wanting to have an event, and we wanted to sort of have an event to let people see their helicopter that they bought, because it first came out of the COVID thing, really, is in that people had invested money to get the new AW169. And then, it was in the aftermath of COVID. So it was, right, well, we need an event to show off the aircraft. And it's like, well, we had an event here, and because it's on a main road, it was wildly successful, but it clogged the road and, was creating a traffic hazard. So we kind of went, okay, well, we need a bigger event, because clearly we're more popular than we thought we were. Right, well, where are we going to do it? And we go, well, we'll put it in a field. And like, well, that's just going to be a helicopter in the field. And so it started to snowball. It's like, well, what if we had food stalls there? Well, what if we have entertainment and kids' games and things like that? So I think it's in its third or fourth year, depending on who's counting, because I think a couple of years ago we had to cancel because of inclement weather. But we've literally just had it in the last couple of weeks. It's now becoming a yearly thing down at Scilly House, and it's kind of a blue light day. We have helicopter flights, not in our helicopter. We have a pleasure flight, Adventure 001 that come down, and it's a heli-fest. So it truly is, a heli-fest. So you can come down, see the aircraft, meet the crews. And it's a really nice way for ex-patients to come back and, in their own way, in their own terms, just re-engage with the crew and the helicopters to just find some closure in it. And we do get quite a few patients that come out of the crowd and want to talk about their experience, and with kind of people that understand them. I think that's how I can describe it, is because they've had this experience. It's so different to their normal experiences that it's almost like they feel they can talk to people who have, if not the crew themselves who were there with their experience, but they can interact with people who are doing it day in, day out. So yeah, we've got a music festival. We also had a working boat race as well a couple of weeks ago. So because of the unique nature of Cornwall, we kind of have unique sort of fundraising events that I don't think any of the other air ambulances will have a music festival or a working boat race. Nice. So that's the unusual and you can call it charm of Cornwall Air Ambulance, is that we have very, very successful fundraisers, but because they're coming up with these new ideas all the time, it always stays fresh. I said I was going to come up with some ridiculous figures. I think to keep us going, we need about 8 million a year, which is about £16 per person per year. That's man, woman and child that live in Cornwall. Obviously, it's skewed by the visitors that come down and donate. We have charity collection jars in lots of places. We have people who give one-off donations, and people come to the festivals. We have auctions, and there's a heli dinner where we sell places and have that at one of the places. We've got a heli dinner coming on Friday. So there's always something going on, and it kind of tags along and is complementary to the holiday season here, as well as doing stuff in the winter.
Yeah. Well, it's quite an elegant system, really, isn't it? Because you're providing the services to the community, but the community, in return gets quite a strong sense of ownership that allows you to continue funding the operation.
Indeed, And that's the retail element of it, because you think, okay, someone cynical could say, well, festivals and boat races and all that sort of stuff, that sounds like it's catering just for the visitors. The Helifest is set up early on in the season before the school holidays as a nod to, look, it's not people on holiday can come to it and do come to it, but it's not specifically set up in the season. It's a thank you to our local donors as well. And we have retail shops. We've got retail shops in all of the major towns here, and we have plans to expand. And they are providing, low-cost clothing, low-cost furniture, low-cost all kinds of domestic appliances and all kinds of stuff like that to assist and be part of the local community, who are the lifeblood of what we do. So, yeah, we are very much part of the community, and our volunteers are our absolute lifeblood in what we do and keep us afloat and, keep the costs down. So it's a very organic Cornwall way of doing things. You say dog looks like its owner. The charity does represent a lot of the stuff that's going on in Cornwall, both from the local residents and the visitors, because obviously we serve both, but we are definitely part of the community. And we did our Heli 2 Heroes, where people could pay. As the helicopter flies past, you look up and you think you're looking at yellow chevrons on the bottom of the aircraft. But what you are in fact looking at is people's names, and people have paid, a small, donation to have people there, the loved ones and themselves, on the bottom of the aircraft, and and they really do feel like they own it. Come and see your helicopter. It's very much pitched like that, because that's what it is. It's a real sense of ownership from the Cornish people over the helicopters that we have.
That's a really nice touch. One thing I have heard from a lot of air ambulances, though, obviously everyone's aware that their charitable donations go towards the air ambulance. But one thing I hear is that occasionally there are concerns that people don't realise that they don't get any funding from the government, or that some people think that they're part of the NHS. Is this an issue that you've come across, and how exactly do you address that?
The paramedics are South West Ambulance, which is part of the NHS, and our doctors are part of the NHS. So in some ways we are part of the NHS, but it's all, a lot of the answers to the questions is yes and no. But yes, there is a lot of surprise that it's not part of the NHS. And again, it goes back to, if it was part of the NHS, they're getting a lot of cuts at the moment, a lot of rationalisation, and we are to a greater degree immune from that. So I think it's the best mix of all, that we're part NHS, part not. So we can jump in and out depending on whether there's any benefit to being looked on in that way or not. And, are we NHS? Well, is there a benefit to being looked at as part of the NHS? Yes, South West Ambulance, etc., etc. We've got their expertise, we've got their buying power with the drugs, we've got their clinical excellence, but we're not part of those cuts that may affect the NHS and South West Ambulance. So it's not one thing or the other. It is very Cornish.
So just one last question, just to finish off. Obviously, you must see a lot of missions coming through the organisation every year.
Yeah.
Do you have one that you would say is the one that you think is the most memorable?
There are a few. There are ones where we were put forward for a national award, where our paramedics, someone had fallen down a cliff, and it was a joint exercise with the Coast Guard and the Air Ambulance, and our paramedics are up to their chest in water at the bottom of this cliff with the tide coming in, administering medical procedures and keeping the patient alive and well, but they were up to their chest in water. That is a memorable one that sticks in my mind. There is the patient confidentiality thing, so we only get to hear, in the charity side of the house, the details of ones that the patients are happy to release that. So I'm a bit guarded of what I can and can't say, but we got a card from a family who just recently that came down on holiday, and their child was having a choking incident, and the helicopter got there and intervened. They were very lucky. There was some medical expertise already there. But the helicopter got the child and the mother in the back as well, to the hospital quite quickly. The helicopter came back, replenished, and was out on another mission. And we got a card from the family about 2 weeks later saying, "Mum, here's a picture of the child in her favourite garden, picking a flower, right as rain, absolutely fine." And from the mood of the crew afterwards, they were quite concerned about the outcomes. For that child to be absolutely right as rain 2 weeks later, particularly, you can imagine the terror of the family and the terror of the mum. And they were complimenting, the crew and how they kept them informed and how the crew looked after not just the patient, but the family as well. So that one sticks in my mind. One, because it's recent, but two, because it's got a happy ending. And three, I just happened to be around the crew when they got called out on that mission, and and when they came back, and was actually the card came into the office, and I actually delivered the card and read what it. So it sticks in my mind because I accidentally kind of got the full picture, which we don't normally do because of that patient confidentiality, where it's only the medical crew really know the details, and we only find out when families approach us wanting to tell our story.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so glad it had a happy ending. I mean, yeah, I hadn't thought about the patient confidentiality thing, but of course, I suppose it's quite...
No, it's quite awkward because you think, right, we need to sing about these cases to advertise what we do, but straight away, as soon as the helicopter leaves the base, that's it. The patient confidentiality. And the charity side, we only get the very top view of the details because naturally the patient confidentiality kicks in.
Yeah, of course. Well, I think that's everything I have to talk about. But thank you so very much for...
No, thank you. Thank you for your interest.
For
and thank you for giving us the opportunity to thank our donors and, explain what we do, which is kind of what our people in Cornwall tell us to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Long may it continue. Well, have a nice rest of the day. And
you. Thank you.
You too. Bye. And that's it for this episode of Waypoint. Thanks again to Alf for joining us on the show today. And if you liked what you heard today, consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. If you really liked what you heard today, why not check out the AirMed&Rescue website for more news and analysis about the special aviation sector. Until then, safe flying.